We see the red sky against the background of the forest. The wind is raging, throwing up leaves. And the atmosphere seems uneasy. After which you can see how a person lies covered in cuts and blood. The same body with cuts is visible, but a hand appears in the frame, which is most likely torn off. Next we see a shocked guy who stands above this whole picture with a broken shoulder from a sword blade. And he reasons that all he sees is the color of blood. And the hero looks at all these terrifying shots. How people lie all wounded and dead on the ground. And he says that the only thing left here is death. The guy, in bewilderment, did not understand why all this blood appeared. After which we are shown a lying body and a huge ball lies next to it. Suddenly, the wounded guy without an arm turned around and paid attention to this sword. The weapon was sticking out in the ground right next to the dead body of one of the soldiers. After which we are shown memories of how some man was pierced by some incredible force. The flashback continues and we see another guy being killed by the same incredible force, his body shattered into pieces. It shows a terrible massacre, as bodies flew in different directions. Hands were cut off, people were burning. And in this image, one woman stood out. The next moment, the memories end and the hero, gritting his teeth, shouts that they are all dead. The wounded guy continues to say that this was the last suicide squad consisting of representatives of the elite of the Miram world. Represented by the great martial arts schools, and they are all dead. These deaths were due to a clash between them and Kyanma, and ultimately this led to the complete destruction of all life. But the hero still didn't understand who was to blame for all this. But the next moment a man is seen on the mountain with many blades stuck into him. And the hero says that it's all because of him, the demon who came down from heaven. This man is the founder of the Majos, whose demonic followers have turned the world bloody. And his name is Kyanma Mama Demon, the founder of the demonic sect. After which the demon proclaimed. He said Huashan School with a sneer. Repeating the name of the school, he said what a pity it was, which infuriated the hero. After these words, the hero stood up with difficulty, leaning on his knee. The next moment the guy started coughing up blood. And there was blood everywhere. The hero continues to hear the words of the demon, who says that if he would get out of here alive, he could enjoy a triumphant victory for the rest of his life, but it seems that the end has come for them. But the hero, writhing in pain, told the demon to close his mouth. But the demon continued to talk and said something that the guy can be proud of. Kyanma continues his speech. In saying that, thanks to the incredible help of these people, the hero's sword still overtook him. Keep the demon saying that his ball skills are the greatest of all, he recognizes this guy. But the next moment the hero pulls out a sword that pierces his shoulder. But the guy stops the demon, shouting at him to shut up. After which the hero begins to run towards the demon with the ball, and he argues that what a pity, and if he had more, he would have revealed his entire true essence, which corresponds to his name. But this must be his fate. Why did the demon not have time to say anything else? Because the hero was pierced in the head and it flew off. After which the guy continued his speech about how the war is finally over. But, unfortunately, inevitable death is approaching him too. And in the hero's head there was only one thought: what will happen to the Huashan school now? The guy continues to speculate that the bones of all the Huashan followers are now buried in this place. That the young old people all died? Only weak children remained alive. Were the lives of the Huashan followers a meaningless sacrifice? Reasoning, the hero said something with a little more effort. He could have saved at least one more life. After which he said that it was pointless. That all this is meaningless, that plum blossoms fall sooner or later. After which the guy dies. After which we are shown that a student of the great Huashan school, one of the greatest swordsmen in the world, is the noble blade of the plum blossom, Cheonmyeong. After the murder of Kyanma, who plunged the whole world into chaos, he plunged into eternal sleep on the top of a mountain of demon heads. Summing up, the hero said that these were the last couple of lines that he could leave to this world. And before his death, the hero begins to have memories of his past life. How the guy trained relentlessly in sword skills. How the mentor scolded him, calling the hero a scoundrel. how a guy was scolded for getting into a fight, saying that first of all he is a Tao, and only then a warrior. And the fact that they must understand that a village without Tao is simply violence. But the hero stood and did not understand why he was grumbling again. Continuing, the guy said that he was simply bored, and that he was a follower of Huashan, but failed to fully follow the teachings, and that in fact, he was just a narcissistic prong who received undeserved praise only for his outstanding innate talent. To which the guy replies that yes, he regrets everything. The fact that Ink took the training more seriously from the rate, the uprising, he is a little stronger. To which the guy replies that yes, he regrets everything. The fact that Ink took the training more seriously from the rate, the uprising, he is a little stronger. Perhaps he could change this terrible ending. To which the hero received an answer from the man that there is no need to regret anything, this is Huashan. And no matter what happens, the Huashan school will continue to exist. After which the guy woke up from a blow to the head with something heavy. The hero's first thought was that Kianma had hit him and wasn't this bastard dead? Then the answer I heard was that Kanma, his ass Kanma, that it's good to rave and why the hell is he sleeping here, a poor rabble. The hero saw in front of him some guy standing with a stick in his hands, who continued to shout that everyone else had gone to beg, and here he fell apart. But the boy was at a loss, did not understand what was happening here. Not understanding, the guy asked the kid who was attacking if he was threatening him. And he told him that he didn't understand a damn thing what was going on, so first let him stop waving his stick. But in response to this, the hero received only that he would die today. But the guy thought that he needed to teach this guy a lesson in good manners and that now he would block this blow with a baton. After which the guy extended his hand, but realized that his arms were very short and he couldn't reach it. And how can they be so short that he cannot block this blow? After which he was hit on the head with a baton again. The guy with the baton continued to insult the hero and shout, saying that the bastard doesn't understand that this is happening, doesn't understand, and continued to beat him with the baton, saying that he will now explain to him what is happening. Continuing to beat the hero, the boy shouted that if this guy was crazy, then now he would be completely blown away and the baton would set him straight. After which some guy entered the tent. And I was completely shocked by what was happening. After which the guy who came in began to leave, and the hero shouted that someone had helped. After the beating, the hero came to the river to treat his wounds. He was in a lot of pain and called the guy who beat him a damn bastard. And the fact that the guy didn't get that much even in Huashan. But the next moment the hero was perplexed, because he looked at the water and saw his face, and he did not understand what kind of little guy was in the reflection. He began to pinch himself and say, what the hell is going on here, and is this really the reincarnation that was said in Buddhism? And the fact that if I knew about this, it would be better to join Shaolin and not Huashan. But the next moment he turned to the hero like a kid who came in when he was being beaten. He asked if the heroes were okay and that their leader had always been like this, but today he had gone wild. But the next moment, Cheon Myung told the guy that he had one question. After which he said no, that the hero still had a question. In response to this, the guy was perplexed. The hero decided to find out if he was a beggar. In response to this, the guy said that it was easy to understand just by looking at his clothes. The hero was horrified by this, saying that he was a beggar. After which Cheon Myung decided to ask a question. He asked the guy if he knew who Kanma was. The boy's response to this was that he thought the heroes were okay after they beat him up, but apparently not very well. Continuing, the boy said that it was a demon, the founder of Magio, who died years ago. What shocked the hero? Cheon Myung was in complete shock and started shouting that how is this possible? The fact that years have passed since his death. And the boy was in complete shock and did not understand what was wrong with him. The hero continued to shout, asking if the guy was probably for him. To which I heard the answer that what was the point of lying to him? After which Cheon Myung calmed down and was completely shocked. The swordsman was shocked, calling it some kind of madness that years had passed. And why then was he not reborn immediately after death? The hero continued to reason and say that it was as if he was left completely alone in the whole world. And why is everything so confusing? The guy interrupted his thoughts by asking if he was okay. The guy's response to this was puzzled, and he asked, "What is Huashan?" Which plunged the hero into even greater shock. After which the swordsman asked if the guy was a beggar. In response, he received that the beggar was the same as him. After which the hero said that if the guy is a ragamuffin, it means that he belongs to the school of fucking, but at the same time he does not know any of the greatest martial arts schools of Huashan. How is this possible? But the guy was shocked and asked the swordsman what kind of nonsense he was talking about. That the great schools of martial arts are Shaolin, Wudang, Danken, Kongtong, Chongsong, Ame, Kunlun, Gabong, Zhongnan, and Hainam. And the fact that there is no Huashan in martial arts schools. This plunged the hero into maximum shock, and he did not understand how come martial arts schools do not have Huashan and why. Volume Chapter. The hero continued to shake the poor man, asking how the Khans got into martial arts schools. How did these hillbillies manage to do so? Later he said, much more important, how come there is no Huashan in these schools? How is he not here? But the guy was at a loss when they shook him. He didn't understand what Huashan was, what his interlocutor was talking about. But the next moment the boy remembered that he seemed to have heard that there was such a place in Shaanxi province. What shocked the hero? The rejoiced swordsman said that yes, that's right, Huashan is located in Shaanxi province. And what does the boy know about this place? To which the hero received in response that the boy had not heard that Huashan was in martial arts schools. The boy was stuck in thought. He tried to remember what happened to Huashan. But then he complied and asked, wasn't the Huashan school destroyed? The hero lost his speech, he was completely shocked. He could only think in shock, Huashan was destroyed, how could this be? Changmen continued to wonder how it was that Huashan, one of the most famous schools in the world, along with Wudang and the great Nangong clan, was destroyed. After which the hero let the boy go in shock, to which he was very surprised and exclaimed, "Eh?" After the swordsman let go of the boy, he fell to the ground. And he fell rather unpleasantly. The hero stood in shock and did not know what to say. He was completely defeated by this fact. And the boy was lying on the ground holding his head and didn't understand what the hell was going on here. After which the swordsman exclaimed that he would not believe it until he saw it with his own eyes. And the boy could only be surprised while lying on the ground. Clenching his fists, the hero exclaimed that he was going to mount Huashan. The boy was surprised and, continuing to lie on the ground, he said that the swordsman is a fucking psycho, and let the best one go and beg for alms if he doesn't want to be beaten again. But the hero began to shout at him to shut up, and that he would now ask the boy a couple more questions, and let him answer. After which Cheon Myung decided to find out whose body this was and what the name of the owner of this body was. Having stood up, the boy replied that their hero was a beggar. Where did he get his name from? And so that he is called what he wants. But the next moment the boy added that the swordsman's name was Cho Sam. Cheon Myung responded by saying that it was a suitable name for a beggar, and his next question was, what is his age? In response to this, the hero heard that how could ordinary poor people know their age? After which the swordsman asked the boy to introduce himself and name the guy who beat him. The boy asked in surprise if the hero had lost his brains. The guy decided to answer this question by calling himself Kuchil and the leader John Palem. The swordsman accepted this. Cheon Myung told the boy that he would pay double for mercy, and tenfold for insult. And so that the boy remembers his name, and when they meet again, he will definitely repay the boy for his kindness. After which the hero set out on his journey. But not for long, because he didn't know where to go and asked the boy in which direction Mount Huashan from Shaanxi was located. The swordsman ran as fast as he could. Because he had to run. And the fact that in his previous life he had never even ridden such a slow vehicle as a horse. But the next moment the hero fell. He had no strength. Thinking, the swordsman said that he had only run for nothing, and was already exhausted, all for the dead body of this child. He didn't understand how he would get to Shaanxi with such a body. Continuing to think, Cheon Myung said that this was absurd and that he would die on the road before he had time to take even one look at Shaanxi province. The hero was sweating like a river and he didn't understand how he could get there. After which something occurred to the swordsman, and he beamed and began doing push-ups. Because he came up with a brilliant plan. And the plan was simple, he just needed to gain physical fitness for martial arts. Reflecting, the hero said that an ordinary person cannot even imagine how amazing this opportunity is. After which he burst into flames. Cheon-myung believes that even those who have reached the top may one day regret that in their youth they did not spend much time on the basics. The hero recalled those moments when the teacher ordered him to train, but he was too lazy to even pretend. And the fact that he was caught drinking alcohol hidden by his elders. But the swordsman admitted that the last point was an exception, because it was very tasty. But be that as it may, the hero will try again. Cheon-myung decided that first of all he needed to find a place where he could avoid external irritants. And he found this place in the forest. In the middle of the trees. After which the hero sat down leaning on a tree and began to think about where he should start. The swordsman began to reason that his mind contained a lot of theoretical knowledge about advanced martial arts techniques. That the martial techniques of the Hwashan school and its history are all stored in his head. Chongmen know about a dozen different breathing techniques for cultivating qi, and if you are not limited to just the Hwashan school, then many times more. Of these techniques, the swordsman decided to master the principle of interactions. This principle combined points thanks to which he could unite with emptiness. And his whole body cooperated for this. After which the hero began to think about what this technique hides. What books with this technique can be bought at the street market for cheap? And why should he study technology that is sold for next to nothing? But Cheon-myung said that they are studying it because it is not some kind of cheap thing. This principle is taught as an introductory course to the teachings of Hwashan. And the fact that every newcomer who enters Hwashan begins his journey precisely with the interaction technique. Continuing to reflect on the hero, he says that although this technique does not increase the student's strength exponentially, it completely cleanses his body. The swordsman continued to concentrate and knew that this was a basic technique and there was no need to rush into this matter. And that in the end the tower of abilities that he has to build should become beautiful in its grandeur. In the following moments, Cheon-myung began to shine as if lightning illuminated his body. This is all due to the fact that it purifies the qi energy of this body. We are told that this feeling is similar to sifting out displaced threads from a giant piece of fabric. And the fact that this is a complete cleansing of unstable energy. And even the tree began to shine from this energy. The hero knew that if you collect all the purified energy in one area of the body, it will turn out to be a foundation and a guide that will reveal a new world to him. This flow of force was small, but full of energy, and it seemed like a snowball. And this is a stormy flow that no one in this world can stop. The swordsman was wondering whether he could now run to Hwashan. The next moment the hero felt tired in his legs and fell to the ground. Because he wasted all his energy. Cheon-myung was indignant, saying that this was a curse and that there was no use for Liu He if he wanted to use his energy right now. But the next moment his teacher appears in heaven, which calls out to the hero and says that before doing something, he always forgets to use his brain. The swordsman got angry and shouted that at this rate he would never reach Hwashan. Even the trees shook from his scream. After which we see a market with many people. They make their purchases, but what stands out from the general masses are the people who enter the corridor. They approach a man sitting near the wall and call him elder. The elder asks what happened, to which he receives the answer that some tramp is intercepting their alms. The guys keep saying that this is a small child, so they throw all the coins to him. The elder was surprised, saying, "That's how it is?" And the owner didn't come up with anything better than how to complicate the life of this beggar. The guys continued to stand, but then the elder shouted, "What are they worth?" After which we went to this beggar together with the elder. And so they approached this beggar. This was the main character. They told the elder that it was that boy. The owner got angry and shouted, "Hey!" The elder was not afraid to insult the swordsman, calling him an idiot and whether he had gone deaf by the hour. After which the hero turned around. And with his mouth full he asked, "What do these guys want?" Cheon Myung's words angered the elder. And he said that how dare you talk, little guy. And the fact that he is completely crazy. The owner began to get angry and say that he did not know from whom the hero received permission to beg here, but since he was still young, they would let him go. The elder continued, saying that, however, you will give away what is in your hand and everything that you collected today can only be thrown away later. Which threw the swordsman into a stupor. The hero thought for a moment, after which he decided to ask whether those guys were really going to take away the bitten food and whether such poor rabble really had no conscience at all? Which made the guys furious. The next moment, Cheon Myung stood up and began to stretch his shoulder. The elder and his subjects were perplexed by this. The hero continued to warm up and hit the air and was hit. The fact is that Dan Tion has not yet recovered, but he thinks that this will be enough. The swordsman turned to the guys and said that now he understood how to control this body and that it was too much for him to mess with these guys. So let them all attack at once. Cheon Myung continued by saying that he's not in the best shape right now, so he won't be able to hit properly and that he hopes that these guys won't mind if they get beat up a little. Which caused the eldest to be furious, and he called the hero a petty son of a bitch. After which the owner ordered his subjects to attack. The first slave threw his blow, but the hero dodged it and responded by punching him right in the face. After which he plopped down on the ground like a sack of potatoes. The other two guys were shocked by this. But the swordsman exclaimed that he was the noble plum blossom blade of the great Huashan school. Having called the guys dirty beggars, the hero beat them beyond recognition. After the fight, the leader and their subjects stood on their knees and said that they were so guilty so that the master would forgive them. However, the swordsman objected. Because who addresses a beggar as Mr. In response to this, the elder asked, how then can he be called a great beggar? And the hero almost choked on his food, asking why the hell they call him a beggar. In response to this, the elder asked for forgiveness. Cheon Myung finished the pie and exclaimed that let the best beggar tell him if there is a quick way to get to Shangxi. The elder was very surprised and asked, Shangxi? The owner laughed and said that a hero asks such things. But the swordsman asked if he knew something? But the elder replied that if they knew such information, they would live like beggars and ask the swordsman to ask something else. But Cheon Myung decided to defuse the situation by saying that he was joking and that it seemed that they misunderstood each other. After which they all laughed together. The next moment, the hero grabbed the elder's t-shirt and said, if they meet again, they must by all means clearly answer the question when the swordsman asks it. After which Cheon Myung summed up that if they understood, then let him get out of here. And the three guys rushed as quickly as possible away from the swordsman. And in the building some grandfather is looking at this beautiful view under the cherry blossoms. His name is Janmun and he is the head of the school. Whereupon his subject exclaimed. The grandfather greeted the worker and asked him to come through. And then the director's chamber opens and On-im goes there. The subject says that nothing of the kind happened, but one child asks to meet with his grandfather. The director was very surprised and asked, child? After which the grandfather came out of his chambers and saw the hero standing. The swordsman greeted the director and said his name, and that he wanted to join Huashan. Volume Chapter. Jang Moon was surprised and had a smile on his face. Exclaimed join Huashan? The director turned to his subject, asking if he had told the child that they were no longer accepting new participants? To which Nam replied that yes, and he tried to stop the guy, but he asked for a meeting. Grandfather's subordinates looked at the hero in surprise. And he generally stood there and smiled. But in fact, the swordsman was furious that they did not want to take him to Huashan school. And to find out the reason for anger, you need to go back a few moments. And we see how the hero, completely exhausted, reached Huangshan. He remembered that the shortcut that was shown to the beggar didn't really help, but in the end he managed to get there on his own. But at the same time, he said that if he met them again, he would break them in as Liulii. After which the swordsman gained determination, grabbing his stick, with which he reached Huangshan. And he decisively rushed up the stairs to the school. After the stairs, he ran along an uneven slope. Climbed the rocks. After all, he wanted to get there, no matter what it took. As he was climbing up the rock, he almost fell because the rock he was holding onto fell away. He was scared, but knew that nothing is impossible if you have willpower. And after he looked down, he became determined and continued to climb up the rock. Inside, they say that he will conquer the mountain of Hua. And when he got to school, he was shocked. Because I didn't understand where the wooden sign of the school's name had gone. He started screaming because his teacher, Sahang, wiped her every morning, and where did she go? And the fact that he's going to go crazy now. After which the doors began to open and the worker decided to find out who was screaming there. The subordinate was surprised, because it was just a child. Without hiding his surprise, the worker asked if the hero really came alone and how did he manage to climb the mountain alone. In response to this, the swordsman could not put words together. He couldn't tell you what he took, but he did take it. Without answering the question, Cheon Myung wanted to ask the employee something. He asked his subordinate whether he was a Taoist from Huashan. The employee was surprised by this question, but replied that it was so. Which caused a surge of happiness in the hero, who thought that the school had not collapsed yet. After which Unam asked the swordsman to go inside. To which Cheon Myung was surprised. The subordinate explained this by saying that they currently do not accept outsiders. But it is unlikely that the hero in such a state as now will be able to go down the mountain. And it's even more inappropriate to leave those who came to Huashan on the street. The employee also added that it is very cold here at night. But the next moment the hero saw the Huashan school and was shocked. He did not understand why the training ground was covered with earth and where the blue jasper covering had disappeared. The subordinate only asked in surprise, "Is something really wrong?" The swordsman tried to calm himself down. They say that these were just stones, and they probably needed money, that's why they sold them. After which he decided to say what a great spacious area they have. The employee's response thanked him. But the hero could not stop being angry because he did not see the golden palace of Huashan on the mountain. After which Cheon Myung decided to stop the worker and ask him why that place looks a little empty. Was there really nothing there before? But the subordinate was upset. And he decided to ask, "Did you really notice this too?" After all, there used to be a palace on that vacant lot. But the hero was aware that there was a palace there, and so he asks about it, but he did not dare to say it. But the workers, rubbing their noses, say that the guy is too young for this story. Unim continued his speech, saying that he was ashamed to talk about it, and he did not know how to express it, because his honor might suffer. But in response to this, the hero caustically replied, "What is dead cannot die." The worker was shocked and asked what the swordsman said, but in response he received what he thought he heard. The subordinate said to the hero, following him and the fact that the guy needs to do something. In response to this, the hero agreed. And he understood that in fact the workers were not to blame for anything. Continuing to think, the swordsman reasoned that, on the contrary, the workers were trying with all their might to save the dying school. And so they approached the Jade Palace. And the hero was only glad that at least he was in place. The workers said that Huashan is the mountain of Taoism, so some customs must be observed. And the subordinate ordered the guy to go to the Jade Palace and get an audience. The hero agreed. The swordsman entered the palace and was amazed. He couldn't understand where everything had gone. Cheon Myung reasoned that the golden candlestick that the emperor gave to the monk was gone. A scroll written by a monk in a golden tomb. Even the paintings that were here have disappeared. But the next moment the hero could not stand it. The most important thing that was missing was the flower. He asked in shock, "Wasn't there a flower here?" The worker was surprised. The swordsman began to get angry and ask where the flower went. And the subordinate did not understand how he knew about the flower. The worker began to remember the dash and said that there seemed to be a strange plum made of white metal. The hero said to be happy that yes, this is the same flower and where it is located. But his subordinates said that they sold it. Bunam continued to say that this flower was of no use anywhere. Yes, and it was an eyesore, standing out from the general interior. And so the merchant offered a good amount for it, and they sold it. When the swordsman heard this, he was simply lost. His face was indescribable. He was disappointed. After which Cheon Myung fell to his knees. And he began to remember his teacher. And speaking in my head, Huashan is destroyed. The guy recalled that the white plum is a Huashan relic, like the sword of the celestial. And the fact that it does not shine like gold, does not shine like silver, a small relic, but carries within itself the pure waters of Huashan. The hero continued to delve into his thoughts. How dare these madmen sell this flower? In response to this, the employee began to run up to the hero and ask if he was okay. But the swordsman only thought about the need to sort out this mess as quickly as possible. The next moment, Chanmyung fell to his knees, bowed his head down and asked the master to allow him to meet with Janmun. The hero shouted and said that he wanted to join the Huashan school. After which we are transported to the present time. And the director is asking the guy to join Huashan school, you say? Grandfather decided to ask the swordsman if he knew what Huashan schools were like? In response to this, the guy said that, of course, he knows. The hero also came up with a brilliant plan, because he knew that no one would accept a stranger to the school so easily. He wanted to use Cheon Jin, who disappeared during the war. The swordsman's plan was ingenious. He came up with a legend that Chanjin fell from the mountain, and a lumberjack noticed him. A traveler passing by decided to patch him up, but the wounds were deep, so he had to linger. And in gratitude for his salvation, the Taoist accepted the lumberjack as a student, teaching him Huashan techniques. And the guy is supposedly a descendant of this lumberjack. And the hero smiled with his genius and believed that the advantage was that he could regulate his distribution, and if this lumberjack was his grandfather, then he was on the same level as Jan Moon. And he thought this plan was mind-blowing. But in response, Janmun only said that he accepted the hero. The hero was shocked. And the director responded by saying that he would accept him since he wanted it so much. The employee was surprised and asked the director why she was doing this if he said something completely different. And grandfather answered that he had changed his mind. The director only said that fate is such an unpredictable thing. The assistant was shocked. He did not understand why he did not have at least a little mistrust of the stranger. Jan Moon said that no matter what, this guy knows our school, that's why he came all this way. Grandfather continued, saying that, as they say, do not drive away the birds that took shelter from the rain under the roof and share food with the beast that came into the cave on a frosty night. And the fact that they don't have anything precious to drive away the kid, right? After which the director turned to his subordinate, telling him to give the guy shelter and prepare the initiation ceremony. The worker accepted this and said that he would start preparing right away. But the hero was indignant. After all, his plan did not work, and his distribution went down the drain. The swordsman was given a uniform. But he just sighed heavily, because this is the form of generational disciples. And he didn't understand why this was happening to him. After this, the hero was perplexed, because he did not understand where, in fact, he was. And the fact that this room seemed to be used for receiving guests. And what I can't wrap my head around is that this place is now being used for the temporary residence of those who have not yet been initiated. Chong Men reasoned that in Huashan they did not use such a concept of distributing newcomers. The disciples were immediately initiated into the teacher, and after that the Taoist shared accommodation with the abbot. After which Nick decided to check if anyone lived here, because it seemed to him that in any case someone should live here. The next moment the hero was stopped and asked who he was. The guy got scared and started to turn around. Turning around, the swordsman saw some huge guy who continued to ask who he was, that he was sick in someone else's room. Was he really a thief? And the hero just looked at the guy in fear. Volume Chapter. And the hero was very surprised, turned around and saw that there were many guys standing nearby who were students. And the guy who shouted at him is called Ghoul. After which the elder approached Ghoul. And what they found out was that Cheonmyeon was snooping around in this guy's room. And the swordsman stood in bewilderment, and did not understand why he needed all these difficulties. But the next moment a man called out to them. Shouting for everyone to be quiet, he decided to find out what the noise was all about. It was the teacher who conducted the training. He continued to shout, saying that the training was not over yet, and they had already started a booth here. After which the guys who accused the hero apologized to the master. And then the teacher noticed the swordsman, and he decided to find out who he was. And Cheon Myung introduced himself. The trainer became calmer and said that he must be new to the White Plum Blossom House. Summing up, the teacher said that it was already late and the guy should rest, and so that he would not forget and be sure to come to training. After which the man ordered everyone else to go down. When everyone started to run away, the hero noticed the look of the guy who was shouting at him. And he called out to the swordsman, saying that he would deal with him later, and that the hero would get a good deal from him. Chang Mayan looked with disdain and said that good, since they are his little Huashan successors, then he will pay special attention to them. And even if his definition of paying attention differs from the usual one. But this is no longer his problem. Night has fallen and we see the guy who was yelling at the swordsman ordering him to take something off. The heroes, at a loss, did not understand what he needed to remove. In response to this, the guy told him to take off his clothes and not to play dumb. With ridicule, Ghoul said that in this way men become closer and that the hero should dance naked while he is beaten. And he asked, wouldn't this strengthen the bond between him and his elders? The swordsman got angry and asked, where is the advisor on AM? The guy replied that the advisor does not work after half a day. But the next moment Ghoul changed his mind after the hero wouldn't shut up and he wanted to start with an instructive beating. In response to this, Cheon Myung told the elder to grit his teeth. And the hero dealt a crushing blow to the offender. Yes, so strong that it stuck into the ceiling. The rest of the students were in complete shock, they were filled with horror. And the ghoul was sticking out in the ceiling. The swordsman asked with a terrifying smile, start an instructive beating, you say? And he shouted that the fucking elders had gone crazy. After this we see one of the students massaging the hero's shoulders. And he asks him to put more effort into the massage and that this is only for them, because he is the eldest here. In response to this, the elder said that he would do everything in his power. Cheon Myung called out to the guy who was threatening him. And he asked him to come up and said that he would not beat him anymore. The swordsman said that he does not know about everything that is happening now in Huashan, so he has a number of questions. In response to this, Ghoul said, that of course, sir, you can ask me about anything. And the hero decided to ask what happened to the heavenly golden palace. And why are Huashan in such chaos? The swollen guy began his story. Asking the hero if he knows about the saint, the Plum Blossom Mosque. The swordsman replied that, of course. Except that it's him. Ghoul said what the elders said, the holy sword of the Plum Blossom played a major role in defeating the Chuanma, but immediately after that, the heavenly demon sect became enraged and made its way into Zhangyang. And for some reason they reached Huashan and burned it. Continuing, the guy said that due to the damage done then, they had not yet had time to return all their former greatness. The hero was shocked, realizing that this meant that the reason why Huashan fell into decay was himself. And the fact that he hates his life. The swordsman was flooded with memories of how he spoke with the advisor. He was told that the Tai Flumox sword technique does not have Taoist foundations, without them it is extremely weak. And that he does not think that there will be problems even if they get rid of the Huashan technique, and asked the student for his opinion. To which the hero replied that this ball technique is terrible, and it is not worth attention, so we should probably throw it away. In response to this, the subordinate said that although this would cause some problems, because this was the technique of their ancestors. And then Cheon Myung suggested that, no matter how the children showed interest in her, why don't they just remove all these books from the library? To which the employee replied that it sounded good, and that's what they would do. Unim continued, saying that there was something else that the teacher would like to tell the student. And the fact that he called him today was not only for this question. The subordinate said that he thought it was time for the hero to have his own students. And he asked how he would train them. In response to this, the swordsman was surprised, and the next moment he squeezed the cookie, breaking it. Why did the hero say that there was nothing to think about here, and at first he would simply beat them. And when they are on the verge of life and death, they will surpass themselves. But after these words he was never offered students. After that, the swordsman lay down to rest, and one of the students woke him up and said that he was being called to the training ground. And the fact that the worker said that the hero should be at today's training. And so we see how the students begin to swing their swords and practice their strikes. And Cheon Myung and their teacher stood and watched this, but the hero's face was indescribable, he was in complete shock. And so the swordsman decided to find out from the sensei what kind of ball technique this was. To which he received an answer about what kind of technique he is practicing, and his oldest is called the ball balance technique. And that this technique is fundamental to Huashan. But the hero continued to be in shock and reasoned that this is the basis for the Hua Mountain techniques. What the hell are these idiots doing? This technique only prevents children from becoming stronger. And this is the same as learning the alphabet through a complex book. The swordsman decided to approach the students. And he just walked by silently, because there was an explosion in his head. He reasoned that this technique would only help them advance half a step, that is, it gave practically nothing. He didn't understand what good the students would get out of it without the proper foundation. And that, even if this is the case, then their technique is incorrect. After which the hero looked at the sky, and he simply thought it was beautiful, because it was so blue, so clear, and cloudless. So similar to the greatness of Huashan. But he didn't even know where to start. But then the swordsman decided to respond to one of the students, calling him senior. He asked with fear what the hero wants? And he just asked, what are they taught here besides this ball technique? And the guy began his story by saying that after learning the ball balance technique, they don't study the ball family sage technique, and after that they study the latest technique of the plum blossom house and study the little chin ball technique. And after all this, they get the right to learn the secret Huashan technique, the Tai Flumox ball technique. The hero was shocked by this answer, because this technique should have been thrown out of the archives and the fact that it does not have Taoist foundations and is extremely weak. He didn't understand why it was still active if they had agreed to throw it away. The swordsman was perplexed, because he did not understand what happened to the plum blossom movement sword technique. After this, the teacher called out to the chatterers and ordered them to come up to him immediately. Evening came and the hero decided to turn to Jo Gul. He decided to apply officially, but Cheon Myung asked him not to do so. The swordsman asked the student for a favor, and he agreed flawlessly. The request was that everyone gather in front of the White Plum Blossom House tomorrow at. The hero also asked the student to listen carefully to what he had to say. He asked Gul to prepare a piece of something for each of them, he didn't say what exactly. The student was at a loss and asked if the heroes were sure that he needed to prepare them. And he asked with a smile on his face whether he really couldn't handle it? But the student said that the swordsman could count on him. Cheon Myung said that he liked the guy's enthusiasm and that he could go now. After which the hero began to reason that the current Huangshan has neither techniques, nor wealth, nor talent. And it is not surprising that she collapsed so easily. And the only way a swordsman can help is with talent. The current students are third-rate and do not look talented. But, as you know, a journey of miles begins with one step. And so the hero leaves the building, reasoning that raising useless elders will be his goal. In the courtyard, some guy showed his dissatisfaction with the fact that some junior forced his elders to come whenever he wanted. And he called out to the guys who were there last night and saw how the hero beat them. But the hero intervened in the conversation, and he said that he was the same junior that the guy was talking about. The students who didn't know him were shocked. And one of them began to shout, "What does the swordsman allow himself to do by gathering his elders so early, and how dare he?" And the hero, without thinking twice, invited his seniors to the boarding house, telling them that they misunderstood each other. After which he drove them into the building and closed the door behind them. And the students who knew him stood in a stupor. But Gul noticed that the building was shaking a little. And the next moment, the students whom the hero led into the building ran out in horror. And the next moment, everyone lined up in front of the swordsman. And he told them that everything was fine, and that they should be a little quiet, otherwise they would wake up the master. Continuing, the hero said that now they will get ready for training every morning at the same time. Dawn came, the sun shrouded the mountains beautifully, and its rays began to shine through the teacher's window. Sensei was thoughtful because he did not understand why the students did not come to greet him in the morning. And he thought that this meant that everyone in the House of White Plum Blossoms was still sleeping. After which the master got dressed. And he began to walk, remembering that they had a new guy. And the fact that the disciples were probably tired after the initiation ceremony or something like that. As he left the building, he decided that he would teach them a good lesson. And that, even if you think so, if Jojo suddenly turned out to be an angry beast, Yunjong would not let him go too far. But the next moment the teacher became stunned. Because he saw beaten students who were begging for help. He didn't understand why everyone was so half dead. He started screaming, "What's going on here?" And asked again what happened here. But the disciples did not dare to say anything to him. Sensei did not understand what the reason should be that the students did not want to tell even him. But after that the teacher saw Joe Ghoul. But something more important was behind him, it was a newcomer. And he squatted with big stones. He raised them a whole time. Volume Chapter. The hero was distracted from training and saw the master himself again. And the teacher stood in shock and did not understand how this child was so exhausted that his legs were shaking just from standing. And then the sensei shouted for someone to bring him water right away. And the swordsman calmly told him not to worry. And so the hero drank water, and the teacher asked him to tell about what happened here. Because the disciples lay without strength and asked for help. In response, the swordsman said that nothing special had happened, and this was a small exercise, and they decided to exercise. So every day, starting from today, and because it is a day, the guys overdid it a little. And behind the teachers stood the students and shook their heads with their hands. It is not so? And the coach himself was shocked that they were full of energy. But at the same time, the hero looked at them with anger, and they calmed down. The teacher was at a loss as to why they were here, and were they really that afraid of this child? Sensei thought that they dare to call themselves disciples of the Huashan sect, and at the same time they are afraid of this guy. And I thought about reprimanding him. And so the teacher began to shout at the hero about how dare he, and that in the House of White Plum Blossoms there is a strict set of rules. And who told him that he could sacrifice sleep for training? The swordsman expected something like this and therefore said that he would stop doing it. But the teacher did not expect such an answer from him. The coach decided to put pressure on what he was expressing to his seniors. And then he changed his mind, saying that it would show them not in the best light. And the heroes only smiled sweetly in response. Sensei began to think about how the students in the class already looked like complete idiots for being taught by a newbie, and he himself looked like the biggest idiot for teaching them. But then suddenly the trainer's flow of thoughts was interrupted by a swordsman. He asked for just 1 month of training and he would see the results. Continuing, the hero said that she is appreciated and respects the determination of his elders. And, despite the hardships of this training, none of them ever complained. He shouted to them, "The guy is right," and they answered yes. And the teacher was in his own thoughts. He thought that, probably, Cheonmyeong meant that no one dared to complain. He didn't understand where he came from. He came and subjugated all the students in the class in order to teach others with the help of authority. But the coach decided to say that it would not be easy for the swordsman either. And why does he suggest training every morning? And in response, the hero said that they can become stronger by learning from a master, but they can also speed it up if they put in more effort. Continuing, the swordsman said that it is therefore reasonable to sacrifice some of your sleep time for training. And the coach only thought that this is why they think that training needs to be paid more attention. And so the teacher decided to ask what is most important. And the guy replied that it was polite. And the fact that he will accept the words of his elder as the will of heaven. The coach did not expect such an answer, and he realized that the guy did not look down on his elders, but remained polite for the benefit of the hierarchy. And the fact that he is an ideal student. And so the teacher stood in front of his students and told them to voluntarily take part in the training at dawn. And the fact that he is extremely impressed by the determination of the students. And the fact that if they continue to try so hard, they will achieve unprecedented success, and so that they continue in the same spirit. One of the guys asked him to save them, but the coach left. The disciples prayed to the master to save them, and the hero said that he told the elders that he was not going to kill them or anything like that. And he invited them to talk again at the boarding house. Because of this, the students fell into a stupor. And we entered the building. And the hero shouted, "My dear elders," he beat them. And a few days later the swordsman sat and meditated. Once again, energy covered his entire body, and although it was still a small and weak dantian, it gave him a feeling of peace. The hero reasoned that over the past time he had learned a lot about Huashan. That the House of White Plum Blossoms, as he thought, is more of a dormitory. This happened due to a lack of people to conclude an agreement between a student and a master. And secondly, the fact that the sect leader is his bloodline, putting aside their personality as weaklings. And their strength cannot be compared with the Huashan sect, the time of the swordsman. And accordingly, the students are even weaker, and in addition, most of the students in the class joined the sect only for the sake of establishing connections. But the hero doesn't care much about this. But the guy was determined because he had returned and the great Cheon Myung was here. After which he stood up and said that becoming the strongest sect is a dream come true. Next we see all the students eating lunch at huge tables in the cafeteria. One of the students began to resent the fact that they should not train so much that they could not even eat normally. And so the indignant guy turned to Joe Ghoul and asked him to talk to the hero. Because he hasn't been able to use chopsticks normally for several days now, and it's driving him crazy. But the elder only replied that they talk too much. And the fact that he is not an errand boy. Continuing, Ghoul said that the swordsman does not avoid or hide from him. So why doesn't he then come up and say everything he thinks? After this, the elder turned to the master and asked him to give him some time. He agreed, and they went outside. It was already dark outside, and so they stood between the trees and began to communicate. Joe Ghoul asked the elder if he had a good rest. And what does he think about Huashan? And in response, the elder said that this is a rather difficult question. The guy said that as soon as he decided to return to his own city, everything would end for him, but it would be hard for the eldest. And didn't he plan to spend his entire life in the Huashan sect? To which the elder agreed in response. And now Ghoul says that he really thought that the Huashan sect had come to an end. The elder asked him to show more respect and that he should not say this with such a simple face. But the guy continued, saying that he changed his mind and that Cheon Myung, after he showed up, despite the fact that they were forced. The guy realized something after training. He realized that he had never brought himself to such a state. Continuing, Ghoul said that this child. He pretended that he wasn't the least bit tired when his loads were much greater than theirs. And what he wants to do is just like a hero. And the fact that he wants to try his best to become a master of such a level that the whole world will know. And the elder said that he shared his ideas. And the hero watched this with a smile on his face and sitting on a tree. The swordsman was happy, and from this happiness he said that these two were definitely ready to become masters. Then the hero began to reason that it was also quite easy to convince Angama, but he still has a task now. Before his thoughts could finish, he was interrupted. Someone was banging on the door and demanding that the sect leader come out to them. I was at a loss. And so aggressive people broke the gate to smithereens. There was a gang of people standing there, who demanded the leader of the sect and that he come out to them. They were very aggressive and went inside and started looking for the sect leaders. And they ordered the workers to get out of the way now. The teachers only said that they could not do such a thing here. And the man started screaming that this worm had really just touched him. The hero watched this in shock and did not believe how they broke through the gate, through the Huashan gate. And what the hell is going on here? But the angry people continued to shout that they had waited too long, that they had no more time, and when would they return their money? The hero's mouth dropped open when he heard that Huashan should return the money to these people. He was perplexed. How did these guys even get into such a shitty situation? Volume Chapter. And now the angry people had already approached the building where the head was located, and they were shouting, "Isn't he at all ashamed, and should he come out now? And let him stop hiding and come out." And so the grandfather showed up and asked the people what brought them to such a remote place so late at night. And the hero watched this and was shocked. And the swordsman only reasoned that there was no doubt that he was really the head of the Huashan sect, and that his every movement and word exudes a thin layer of aura. People continued to shout, saying, "Why is the head trying to pretend to be so calm?" And the hero agreed with them that he was really just trying to behave calmly. And then one of the main haters came out. It was the owner of the Kong Pavilion. And he decided to find out how the head was doing. Grandfather said that he did not expect that the owner of the pavilion himself would come here. And the man responded by saying that it was a little awkward to visit him on such an occasion. And so the owner said that he did not want to climb this mountain again, but many people asked him to do this, and he asked his grandfather to understand him for this. Continuing to speak, the man said that the head must understand perfectly well what these people want, and that the terms they agreed on have long expired. The owner said that they had already tried to understand the situation in the Huashan sect, and if they followed the contract, they should have added half of it to the amount in the contract long ago. But the Hua sect had saved their lives many times, and so they tried to be as gentle as possible with them. And to sum it up, the man said that he was giving the sect days so that they would have time to give the money. And if they do not meet this deadline, they will confiscate the temple of the Huashan sect. The hero was in a stupor from these words. This stupor was noticed by dissatisfied people. And they started laughing at him by saying, "Look, they only allowed the child to see this." And so we are transported to the hotel, where the hero communicates with the students and learns from them that they were traitors from Huaam Prefecture. One of the guys reasoned that who knows what the swordsman will do to him and that it is worth staying away from him. And so the guys began to discuss among themselves that isn't Huaam Prefecture the name of the village behind the mountain. Sanghi replies that Sohyun is right and that he remembers this from the time he traded with his father. And so one of the guys asks the second, "Does this mean the Huashan sect borrowed money from merchants?" And the second one answers that he doesn't even know about this, but he knows about the owner of the pavilion, Kong. Kong is the owner of the Taihua Pavilion in Huaam Prefecture. And he owns the largest Huaam Pavilion, and also takes part in many events, being a wealthy merchant. And so the hero began to become furious. He asked about this pavilion, and did he really own it? And so one of the guys asks the hero to calm down. And he asks again, will he calm down? And that he really told him to calm down. And the rage was justified, because this pavilion originally belonged to the Huashan sect. And so, in a rage, the swordsman grabs one of the guys by the scruff of the neck. And what is screaming is that this bumpkin is really the owner of the pavilion, and he is trying to confiscate the temple of the Huashan sect simply because he lent them money. And the guy replies that everything is so. And so Cheon Mian lets the guy go. And he thinks that something doesn't add up here. And that it is very strange that the new owner of Taihua volunteered to be the first to borrow money from Huashan. And this only means that it was all planned. His hero turns to Ghoul. He asked him to bring what he had told him about that thing. And he ran after it very quickly. And so the guy brought clothes to the swordsman. One of the guys asked what the hero was going to do with him. And he replied that in Buddhist literature there is a saying, kill a Buddha, kill him, if you meet a Buddha, kill him. Continuing to speak, the swordsman said that if you meet your ancestor, kill him, and to reach a high level of Tao, you must violate the path itself, Tao. And the fact that he goes in search of the true path. And the guys were shocked. Why did he dress up like that, that he was a dunce? The guys shouted that the swordsman was really about to leave the sect's temple and that he was crazy. But at the same time, the hero, like a ninja, got out of the sect's favor. And he was approaching some tower. And inside that tower, those guys who came were all angry and discussing what had happened. They said that the sect leader looked very puzzled and that we saw his face, while another said that he was not surprised. They gave them one last chance. They discussed how they had no idea how much they owed them. More Niangs. And the fact that grandfather was even more surprised when he saw the owner of the pavilion with them. And so the owner said that even though he was a merchant looking for profit, he was very sorry that he had to do this to them. Still, their relationship lasted for more than one generation. And now one of the men says that, for sure, he has already done everything possible. And how many concessions has he already given them? And what everyone will praise is how generous his head is. And he replied that he would hope so. But at the same time, the owner reasoned that these men are so carefree, and they are capable of living as such simpletons. It is also surprising that the violence of the Huashan sect should not be looked down upon. After all, their true strength is not in combat power. The thing to fear most from this sect is its history. Continuing to reason, the head thought that there was no one in Shanxi province who did not have connections with Huashan. However, now they have weakened greatly, and they have become tender, like the skin of a duck that is torn by the pressure of the sticks. And so one of the drunken men decided to ask the owner what he was going to do with the temple when it was confiscated. After all, it will be very difficult to sell it, and why don't you take something else from them? As it turned out, it was the advisor to the head of the pavilion. And the boss replied that the value of the temple was much higher than they could imagine. And the fact that even though at first glance it is an old temple, it can guarantee its high cost. Laughing, he continued eating. However, the assistant did not understand what the head was talking about. And he clenched his chopsticks with his teeth and said that he could not tell them this directly, but they could use the enemies of Huashan to their advantage. And so the owner said that many sects would want to have such an opportunity to spend a substantial amount to restore the temple and destroy the Huashan sect. And he asked people not to worry, because they will all get their money. And one of the men praised the head, saying that he, as always, was very insightful. And that then everything is in order, that they should raise a glass to the owner of the pavilion. And they trembled for him. After the feast, one of the very drunk men walked down the street, saying that he felt just fine. And the fact that if he manages to get money out of Huashan, then this amount will last him for the rest of his life, and the fact that the owner of the Kong Pavilion is very meticulous when it comes to money. Continuing to destroy, the drunken man said that he again felt great and that the moon was so bright, but after that he noticed that there was no moon and it was now a new moon. And he said that it's probably worth walking along the main streets at this time. And then suddenly some ninja appeared in front of him. I was shocked. And the hero ordered him to stand still. And the man only reasoned that this guy was like a robber straight out of a drawing, and that he was so small. He didn't understand whether robbers wear such clothes and that robbers say that they are robbers. And so the man decided to ask the hero whether there were robbers at that hour. But in response, the guy said that he was not interested in money, and he just wanted to know the answer to a couple of questions, and he would leave unharmed. But the man grinned and said, not that he didn't want to answer him, but he didn't have a choice, he didn't have much. He said so that the swordsman would understand him, and that he had quite a lot of friends with him. And they don't let him walk alone. And the hero only reasoned that apparently these were high-class bodyguards. One of the bodyguards asked the owner what they should do and whether they should kill this guy. And he replied that first he wanted to listen to him. And so that they catch him without depriving him of the opportunity to speak, because he does not really like violence. I calmly began to leave and hoped that they would not overdo it. The next moment there was a roar, which made the owner scared. And turning around, he said that didn't he tell them to leave him the opportunity to speak? But when the man turned around, he was shocked. After all his bodyguards were beaten. The hero said that people really should listen to what they are told, but there are those who do not. And he asked the man to come to him. The swordsman said that he would repeat himself and that if the man answered his questions, he would not touch him. And he said out of fear that yes, of course. The hero said that it was great that he understood him and grabbed him by the scruff of the neck. And he said that if he had answered his questions right away, he would not have touched him, but he decided to resist. And the swordsman told the man not to worry, but that he would make sure that he could at least speak. Tom head. And now we see the beaten deputy. Who can't speak normally because his cheeks are swollen. He said that's how it happened. The hero takes a swing at him and tells me that he cannot speak humanly, and that he should stop pretending to be a victim. And the man said that he would now tell everything as it is. The deputy told the swordsman everything, and after that the hero asks, that is, he says that Huashan was occupied by more Niangs. And he says that everything is correct. After this, Xion Myung turns to the deputy. They say that even if he takes him to the bone now, it's not like he won't get 100. And he still claims that they owe the almost collapsed Huashan school. And the swollen man says that the hero should understand him, and the fact that interest is such a thing is that they lend at a high interest rate. If the loan is not repaid, then the interest continues to rise. And after that, compared to the amount of interest on the main credit card, for some reason it's insignificant, laughing, the man said. Which definitely angered the swordsman. And the man wanted to end by saying that if he pressed them at that moment, the hero interrupted him, saying that he was really proud of it and that he was an asshole. The student decided to ask the owner of the Hua Ying cotton shop whether he had ever bought it. And the men were perplexed and did not understand what the hero was talking about. And the deputy replies that the cotton shop has belonged to his family from time immemorial. And the swordsman was shocked by this, because he did not understand how this could be, and that the cotton shop was one of the enterprises of Huashan, and all the profitable enterprises of Huayin County belonged to Huashan, and only thanks to Huashan the cotton shop was able to grow to the level of the county. And before it was a village forgotten by God. And I reason that the hero continued to beat the man. He asked to stop, which is why he beats him. And the guy only talked about the fact that management was transferred to trusted persons, but when Huashan fell into decay, they took over the entire business. And the hero did not believe that this was happening. But the swordsman was interrupted by a man, calling him a damned boy, and that he had cowardly attacked on the sly. It was Jonbin, nicknamed Die Hard. He asked the hero to introduce himself, because, judging by his skill, he was not an ordinary warrior. Continuing to scream, the man said what he must have known as his name. Well, Xion Myung just threw up his hands and asked for forgiveness, because his knowledge of names is very poor. And then he asked the tough nut that, well, he finds out his name and who he is, and what next? The man said that he should know who will die from his ball. And the swordsman stood in bewilderment and said that this man had recently fallen into a frill from one blow. Die Hard thought that this upstart should defend himself and, screaming, he ran towards the hero. But the swordsman only reasoned that this tough nut, it is obvious that he has an influential family behind him in the mastery of strength, speed, and even it is stupid to compare him with him. And he still didn't wait for it. In this case, he is weaker than him. But after that he told himself to stop, and speed and strength are not indicators of power. After which the swordsman grabbed his blade. I began to fight off the attacking man. He was shocked. And the guy only reasoned that they had a huge difference in experience, and since the hero still had memories of the noble blade of the plum blossom. If a man is not strong enough, then you just need to use the enemy's strength. And then a stunning blow occurred. The man jumped into the wall. And the hero stood upright, and it was as if the wind was blowing around him. And the hero told him to learn a little and come again. It turns out that it was the plum blossom palm sword style. And the fact that the plum flowers bloomed again. After the fight, the swordsman said that you need to know your place, but he was interrupted by his deputy, who said that it could not be. And irony expected that in his consciousness he completely forgot about him and that he should not have shined with his style. And did he really find out? The man sat in shock, and the swordsman reasoned that he even drew a bud, and he guessed exactly who he was? And the man just said that it was an accurate and at the same time exciting technique. And with an excellent level of craftsmanship, most importantly, he captured a subtle note of freshness. The guy stood in shock, didn't understand how fresh it was, that this wouldn't work. And the deputy nicknamed him to the students from Zanan, and the hero extemporaneously said that he must be from there. Student of Zananya. And the man only said with a smile that he knew. The deputy told the guys to ask and that the servant would answer all questions. And the hero only rejoiced and said that thank you and so be it. And now we see the famous Hua Mountains. And there are guys standing in the building and wondering, where did the hero go? Ghoul is nervous, and the elder tries to calm him down. Pri wanted to object, but the elder told him that the swordsman was no fool, and that he would return before it was too late. And the main thing is that trouble does not happen. And then the doors to the building open and the hero enters. And with the words, "Is everything okay?" he greets the students. But the guys objected, saying that they should be asking if everything went well. And the swordsman replies that it couldn't have been otherwise, and that they also had a heart-to-heart talk and gave money for the trip. Continuing to change his clothes, Chanmyung was perplexed. Why wasn't he recognized as a Huangshan warrior? He, of course, was glad that he was not discovered, but he was a little sad. And that no matter how great the plum blossom sword style is, it is no longer a symbol of Huashan. And how come the deputy, who spent his whole life in these places, still did not recognize Huashan, even after seeing its style? Gul decided to find out from the hero why he left school. But the swordsman replied that the children had no need to know about this. But the guy responded by saying that he was also a child. And the hero replied that it didn't matter, and that he should gather everyone else and that it was time to train. The guy asked in bewilderment that there would be training today too. He didn't understand how it could be if the swordsman had just returned. And Cheonmyung told the elder to listen to him. And the fact that no matter the rain, snow or wind of the day, they will not miss a single training session. Even if everything is covered with snow, even if frost strikes, even if Huashan collapses, they still won't give themselves rest. Gul was happy with such determination and said that he would gather everyone right away. And he wanted to ask the swordsman if he would be there, but the answer he received was that he wouldn't be there. And the fact that he still has things to do. The elder objected, saying that only a hero could conduct the training. And the elder continued, saying that even if they conduct the training themselves today, if you need to expect productivity from them, then it is better for the swordsman to conduct it. To which the hero agreed and said that he would come. Cheonmyung lay down on the bed and began to think about what he should do now, and that he should sort everything out. He reasoned that the former trustees had taken over the entire business, and when the Mahists burst into Huashan, the ledger was consumed by fire. The only proof of the rights to the property of the Huashan enterprise, and if it had survived, all this would not have happened. The hero continued to reason, and he did not understand what he needed to do. He had already reached the point that maybe he should just break into the merchants and deal with them. But after that, he told himself that it was impossible that everyone would think that Huashan had incited the child to commit a crime. And in the end, he needs a loophole such that Huashan will not have to pay the debt to the merchants. And evidence that all enterprises originally belonged to Huashan. And where can one find this proof? The swordsman, not understanding, tossed and turned. And he began to remember what happened before. He remembered the ledger. And if you think about it, he saw the elder one a couple of times taking notes, and as soon as he came in, the teacher immediately hid the thin book. And then it dawned on the hero. The fact that the thin book was not kept in the building that burned down. And that means she is somewhere else. And the fact that there were infinitely many enterprises in the Huashan possessions. And how could they fit on just a couple of pages? And the guy began to think about a secret vault, to which only the head had access, and this is exactly it, the head hid the ledger there. And it was only mentioned in a couple of rumors, but if it really exists, most likely the entrance is in the head's house. The swordsman continued to think and strain his brains, keep it located, because the head's house remained in the same place, and the storage should be located next to the head's house and at the same time not be conspicuous. And then it dawned on the hero that this was the hill behind the head's house. And the fact that it is located in the ground, if the vault is placed inside a hill, no one will guess about its existence, unless he is a ghost. And smiling, Cheonmyung said that this is a sudden treasure hunt. Having opened the window, the swordsman began to reason that he would have to open the hiding place, and so that the great head would enter his position. And for starters, it's worth trying to revive Huashan. And as soon as he takes possession, it will immediately be handed over to his head. And Chanmyung ran towards the hill with a smile, hoping that everything would work out. Volume Chapter. We see the Hua Mountains, and a bright, intense blue light appears among them. As it turned out, he was a hero. He was practicing some technique and was indignant that he would not die for long. But at the same time, he reasoned that even if it is a small hill, a mountain is a mountain, and searching the entire mountain is not an easy task. Especially when you use this method. And so the swordsman began to conjure mana again. And picking it up near his stomach, he launched it into the hill. And she pierced right through this hill. And at that time he reasoned that if energy collided with a large empty space, that would be the storage. At least that's what he thinks. But the guy had no idea where she was, but the earth cannot have a cavity for another reason. The hero was already exhausted and thought that he was going to die. But at the same time, he realized that at least it wasn't here. And so, completely exhausted, he decided to try again, then again, and suddenly he stumbles upon some kind of cavity and is very surprised. A strong mark is left on the ground, and he realizes what he has found. And decide that now we need to dig it up. And the fact is that as soon as he sees everything for himself, the matter will be in the bag. He dug, and dug. As a result, I saw a brick in front of me. And he did not understand that there was a brick to be made here and that maybe this was a roof that was built from ordinary stone and that the Huashan ledger and other valuables should be kept there. And so he was able to pull one of the stones off and he thought, great, and he looked, and there was a corridor. He found a corridor leading to the dungeon. I saw someone coming, and it was the head. The hero was at a loss. He did not know that his grandfather was aware of the existence of this place. The guy saw the director approaching the door. And I realized that this was a cracked wall, the entrance to the dungeon. And so the grandfather approached the wall, but Cheon Myung did not understand what he was doing. And watching the swordsman, he realized that grandfather could not do anything. Either he simply doesn't try to do anything with her, or he is simply unable to do anything. And the hero reasoned that the Huashan school was falling apart and this could not be avoided, and ignorance was flourishing. The state is falling into disrepair. And the management of the Huashan school in such a situation does not just lead to a dead end, but to see how Huashan is collapsing, which you devoted all your life and strength to do something, and what does the grandfather's heart feel? Continuing to reason, the swordsman thinks that the head cannot share this with anyone. After all, the head is the one who should become a support for his students. And therefore, in this place he is left alone with his pain and sadness. But the next moment there is an explosion and the ceiling collapses, and the hero lands on the ground. He jumped off when grandfather had already left. Cheon Myung reasoned that his guilt was great, but it was not too late. First he needs to open the damn door. The guy approached this wall, put his hand and began to put mana there. And the next moment his mana was reflected, and he was shocked, because how could this wall reflect the energy of this madness, and is it really eternal iron? And even as thick as your hand, because this is the most valuable metal, even more expensive than gold, and making a dungeon out of it is inconceivable. And only the strongest warriors can cut such a door. Now it's clear why the chapter didn't even have the courage to open it. But at the same time, the hero understood that the problem was that he couldn't cut it either. The swordsman mused that his elder did not possess the skill to cut through eternal iron. And if the elder calmly walked inside the door, then there is a way to open it. But he did not understand how to recognize him. But soon the guy notices a drawing on the wall. And looking at the fact that this is a line from a sword. And this is the style, the goal of the dream is the plum blossom palm of the sword mark, very similar to the style of the plum blossom. Continuing to look at the marks, the hero realized that this is the skill of a bamboo leaf and the secrets of the art of a sword, a blossoming plum, and this is the principle of interaction and the fact that the picture begins to emerge. And this is possibly the key that will help open the door. The swordsman realized that there were several stages here, or rather, only by combining the mastery of bamboo with the interaction of the palm, he would reveal the true power of the plum blossom sword style. Was this the way to open the door? But he did not understand how this could be done. And so the hero realized that he had figured out the activation method and only one problem remained: how could he do it? And the guy stood with his face down, in complete bewilderment. And if it were the past, he would not have had any problems, but now he has the body of an ordinary teenager. The swordsman has a technique stored in his memory that he can reproduce. But this body does not have enough energy to implement all the stages at once. And I wouldn't say that there is absolutely no way out. But he would have to once again use the technique he did to find this dungeon. Reasoning, the guy didn't realize that it would take about a month to recover, and he only uses a little bit. Circulation of natural Ci. The force that supports life in a person from birth. In other words, life energy. And then the swordsman began to shine with purple energy, which captivated him right down to his eyes. And he reasoned that after using it, he should be willing to pay a high price, but now there is no other choice. He took out his blade and said that he only needed to suffer once. Blood began to flow from his mouth, and he did not know if it would work, but he had no choice but to believe that it would work, despite the fact that he had to return in a body to which he was still not accustomed. The hero took a stance and began to attack the wall, saying that there will be no chance. And so he pierced her. And he realized that it was hard for him, and it was too slow, and his body and mind were already at their limit. However, he cannot retreat. And the swordsman began to embody all these techniques that are drawn in the wall and from the interactions of bamboo mastery to the palms of a blossoming plum tree. Continuously, not even for a second, without breaking the connection. He continued to twirl in the techniques and called himself the noble blade of the plum blossom. Blood continued to spurt from his mouth. But he finished his technique. And so Cheon-myeon looked up to see if it worked, and even if it won't open like that, it will be a complete collapse. But he saw that the wall lit up. And she began to move. And the hero looked around and saw a gap in the wall. A small little gap, and he was glad that it opened. But the next moment blood began to flow from his mouth. And he realized that not just a month, but at least he would fail after this technique. And it's damn hard to revive his own school. And so the boy got up and began to walk, saying that he would see what the elder was so diligently hiding from him. And the hero enters the dungeon, sees in front of him a room with cabinets and books. And he was shocked, because he thought there were a lot more closets, and there was only one closet. But then he realized that only the best of the best could afford a huge storage facility made of eternal iron. The swordsman reasoned that the eldest counted every day that there was no money, and that's where they all went. And the guy pulls out the book he came across and is shocked, because he found exactly the book, the Hwashan Ledger. And in addition to the originals in the Economics and Finance Pavilion, he also made a copy. And he called the elder a meticulous scoundrel. The hero says that the matter is in the bag. And that the damned merchants are all finished, having filled his bosom with books. The swordswoman began to reason that there was nothing else here except paper. And what if the elder hid bribes here? Now they would be very useful to him. And he would eat and drink to his heart's content and create the basis for the revival of Hwashan. The boy calls the head a thorn and says how could he not even take bribes? But on the other hand, what else could he expect and at least look at the documents? And what is stored in the closet? He took the first book he came across from another cabinet and saw that it was a secret technique. And he wondered if they were practicing or not. But then the hero is shocked, because he realizes that these are not valid teachings. These are forgotten teachings, almost lost by the Hwashan school. It was difficult for the eldest head to destroy even teachings that were not supposed to be passed on to the next generation, and he hid them here in case they would have a bad influence on Hwashan in the future. The swordsman felt sad, because he couldn't even imagine how worried the master was. And if the closet proves that the elder regularly fulfilled his duty as the head of Hwashan, then his worries and love for this school are stored. And after that, Chongmen, inflamed, told the elder not to worry, and that he would do everything so that Hwashan would become the same. Although no, it will rise even higher than in the past. And so the guy doesn't pay attention to the last cabinet and there is only one package there. The hero decides to look into it and see that it is signed personally by his head. And it says that if someone reads this text, it means it was approved by the head of the new generation. After all, sometimes one line on paper contains more than 100 words spoken out loud. And therefore the master will express his will in writing. And the fact that he will be the head of Hwashan does not mean keeping the school tightly in check, although if the one who reads is his successor, then he already knows about it. But the ones who truly lead a school are its students, the children who strive to become better people. And the head only plays the role of a guide, which protects them, helping students to realize their potential, and he wishes that, having become the head of the swordsman, he would not worry about how to manage the cola. After all, Huashan is Huashan, it is spirit energy that no one has the power to curb and push around at will. And even having fallen into decline, even experiencing a new flourishing, Huashan will continue to exist. And so that the desire of Huashan, carefully protected by their ancestors, does not fade away, and so that the school invariably exists for many years, they educate a successor and convey their will to them. And as the eldest and previous head, the master puts a heavy burden on the hero's shoulders as for the head of the great Huashan school. The guy didn't win the skein back. And he said that this old man loves meaningless chatter. And so the guy finished looking at the cabinets and said that it's not like he got what he expected, but it should be enough. And the most important thing is that he took out a ledger. After all, with it he can return all the business that belonged to Huangshan. But, leaving, the hero noticed that the dash was strange. After all, the structure of the storage facility still raises some suspicions. Because the senior head, whom he knew, was too fastidious and meticulous, and even the kerosene lamps were placed symmetrically so that the light poured evenly into his room. But only the bookcase is completely empty. And the hero began to examine him. Look around and say that there is definitely something there. And when he lifted it off the ground, he saw a passage in the floor. Something was shining from there, and the guy said that there was something there. And he discovered a treasury. Alluring gold bars, tightly stacked on top of each other, precious balls, neatly placed against the wall, and even a mountain of wealth of secret and unfamiliar techniques. He was shocked by the jewelry and was even surprised that there was a cat's eye there. And he started laughing hysterically, saying that he is now rich. And so the grandfather stood near the window and said that another morning has come for whom the day will bring joy, but for him he is full of despair from the time that I gave him. The owner of the horse has only days left. But then someone called out to the head? It was Ungam. The old man decided to find out what was the matter. And the teacher said that he would tell about everything along the way and that the head should see everything for himself. He just didn't understand where he should go, but he accepted it and said that since the man was talking, he was doing something urgent and that he didn't know all the details, but asked to lead him. And the teacher agreed. And so they galloped and saw in the forest that half the people had been beaten. The head asked the man what happened to the poor children. And he replied that they train on their own in the morning. And so they came, and Arroy sat under a tree and looked at all the notebooks. They're coming, the teacher called out. Ask where it is? And he replied that they should follow him. The elder was shocked. Seeing the hero, he did not understand why he was here. And what finally happened? But the guy told his grandfather that someone had taken a better look at the book, and there was really something important here. But he said that the hero's condition is more important to him. But then he looked at what was so important and saw these books with gold and was delighted. And the swordsman said that he found it by accident. I was shocked, how could he even find this by accident? And the guy replied that he seemed to have gone too far with the training. To which the grandfather replied that he understood and that Cheon Myung should go and rest and that he would not ask anything more. And so the elder began to look at everything that lay, and the sparkling mountains of gold before his eyes. But most important is the accounting of the enterprises of the great Huashan clan in Wayne. And moreover, if he carelessly opens the book and accidentally tears it, he will not sleep a wink until his death. But when he saw the ledger, he simply could not say a word and fainted. When grandfather came to himself, he exclaimed that the postulates of the wild plum sword. Then he remembered that nothing had happened to the box, and everyone was happy because the head came to his senses. And he asked to call the head of the finance department, Hyun Young. And when the manager came and looked at these papers, he said that these were all originals. And this is without a doubt, because he even verified the authenticity of the property rights, and these are government certificates, and they can be evidence. And the fact that even now they can return all the enterprises, including the Taiki Tower, and all these treasures will more than cover the debt to the Nyangov. And grandfather just sighed with relief that it was like a mountain had fallen from his shoulders, and no matter how much he listened to all the good news. But I remembered about the hero, and who knew that one child, who decided to change our hearts, would raise them from their knees. And he became a lucky ticket for Huashan. Grandfather clenched his fists and thought that, however, if the ledger is real, then he must call someone and ordered his subjects to notify and bring everyone who was listed in the ledger of Hawaiian Enterprises. And a few days later, people from the ministry were climbing Mount Huashan. They were indignant because the mountain was very difficult to climb. One of them is not saying that it will fall now. Well, the head said that there was very little left until Huashan and that they should be patient. And one of the men only thought that he would get the money and forget about this terrible place, because he could no longer see this school. And so people began to discuss why the head of the school suddenly called them to climb the mountain. And did he really prepare the money, because Nyangav is hardly a small amount. The owner said that the head must want to ask for help, because there was nowhere to get money from, and asking on the day of reckoning was of no use, so he called them in advance. And the men began to be indignant that Itin ordered them to come only to beg for help. And the fact that he had never met such shameless debtors in his life. And the other man said, yes, he may have debt problems, but he is still the head of the great Huashan school. And don't be too rude about him. And one of the people reasoned that it couldn't be, they wouldn't leave us without money, and the mere appearance of a man from Zenanya suggests that they also have plans for the Huashan estate. After all, his share of everything, and his whole life, he will be able to live without denying himself anything, and he will no longer have to engage in trade. And so they appeared in front of the gate. And they had only one thing in their heads. They were overcome by bitter thoughts of the legacy of Huashan for centuries. Standing guard over Huayin would end at their hands. And if today they do not make concessions in their heads, Huashan will not survive the days. And yet they climbed to Huashan to shake out the swollen debt, like cotton moistened with water. And on the threshold one of the workers was happy to greet them. And he told them that the head was waiting for them and that they should come to him. And all the men approached the house of the head, from which the grandfather came out. Is greeted the head, and he said that they were welcome, they had to travel such a dangerous path. And the owner says that they have nothing to do with turning corners, there must be more worries, and, of course, they had to come. And the director said that it was difficult for the thief to get up, would they like some tea? But the owner called out to the head and told him to forgive him for detaining him, but they were insignificant. Merchants would prefer solving pressing issues to idle pleasure. And grandfather frowned in his face and said, that's what he says, that he acted selfishly. And so the director spills the whole truth, saying that he gathered them here today in order to tell them about the position of Huashan. And what he was looking for a long time and trying to find is to grab any opportunity for you to pay them off the debt, but alas, no matter how much he tries, he will not be able to repay the debt on time. And grandfather said that he was talking about it. The fact that he cannot return all the money starts with a fraction of what they pay. And ask those present if there is anyone who can wait a little longer. And he asks them to help Huashan. The men stood shocked and thought that the situation had surprisingly taken a different turn. And the hero watched them and grinned at how the director decided to act. True, he himself did not yet understand why the head was doing this. If he can just push them into the underworld, or if he just wants to show mercy, and the outcome could go either way. One thing was clear for sure, that Hyun Jang is not such a simpleton as he seems, and for the head of the target clan, secrecy is an integral feature. Even if followers live here, the true nature of the Huashan, nameless clan. Therefore, the head must skillfully manage profits and losses. And the swordsman was wondering if Hyun Jang's anger overcomes him as well as the head? And the owner says what they said, that they can no longer delay the payment date, and even last time it was a problem. And you ask Grandpa to understand him correctly? But the director interrupts the man, saying that he is not addressing him, but the people. He is interested in men who are willing to delay their payment date. The leader got angry and thought that this was a pathetic trick and said that in this case, for those who cannot make concessions, you will be able to pay the debt immediately. And grandfather replied that the Huashan school may not be the same as in the old days, but this does not mean that they have no one to lend a helping hand. And what he failed to collect, but he still prepared some of it. The director appeals to people with a request that Huashan will definitely be paid to everyone who enters their position today. The owner started shouting at the director, asking what kind of nonsense he was talking about. But one of the men interrupted you, asking if they would thank him if he postponed the date. And he answered that it was true. The man turned to the head and asked him to respond to purity. He said that they understand that the Huashan school could collapse even tomorrow, but if they trust him and postpone the payment date, doesn't that mean that they could be left without any money at all? And on what basis should they trust? But grandfather sighed and said that the name is Huashan, the history of Huashan is not enough for them. And in response to this, the owner just laughed and screamed his head. And isn't that putting too much pressure on them? And the hero watched this in complete shock. But the director answered, is he pressing? And then he decided to ask a counter question. What does Huashan mean to all these people, its name, its history, do they have any value for them? Who would take the name Huashan lightly? And who will call the history of Huashan meaningless? It may be in decline now, but Huashan has always been inextricably linked with Huayin. Together with them, Huashan shared the soul's energy. And he wants everyone, standing here now, to think again about what Huashan means to them. Did the owner decide to do this? He asked all the people who are willing to delay the payment date to switch sides from those who disagree and want to receive the money. Today, let them stay where they are. However, the responsibility for the decision lies solely with them. And so that they do not expect that the trade alliance will come to their defense if they are suddenly left without money. And he ordered them to choose. As a result, no one budged, and the owner decided to mock the director, saying, does he see that, no matter how unfortunate it is, no one is going to be delayed? But as a result, after these words, one of the men switched sides. It was the owner you. And people started asking what was this man even thinking about? And he replies that people should not make such a face and that he himself knows that he is acting like a traitor. However, he turned to the owner of the horse and stated that he was not from Huang. That they settled in Huayin as a son-in-law, and therefore do not understand what Huashan means to Huayin. After all, in Huayin they all grew up hearing stories about Huashan, and they told this man that he would join Huashan and become a great master. And even after learning that he did not have a drop of talent to get into Huashan, he grew up surrounded by stories about how Huashan stood guard over the world in Shangxi. The owner was shocked. Why would this man suddenly say that? But he continued that not only he, his father and his grandfather were also brought up this way. This is Huashan, pride, Shangxi, and Huayin. And having received the money, they will simply leave from here somewhere to Hangzhou. It will be very useful to them. Where will he go? He spent his entire life on the lands of Huayin. And the owner said that if these are all the reasons to refuse such a lot of money, then he will regret it. But the man thought that while he was climbing the mountain, he was only thinking about how to get money and live on a grand scale, and now, out of the blue, he says this. He thought he was crazy, though. He can still feed himself. And he says that even if he doesn't receive this money, he will still be able to live. Maybe he regrets that he didn't take them then, but if he steals Huashan brick by brick, he will regret it until his death, having been overlaid with useless money. And he doesn't want such a life. And the owner only said with a smile and a sigh that he should do as he knows, and nothing will change because of him alone. But after that, more people called out to him and said, who said that there was only one? As a result, almost all people went to the man who refused the money. And the owner was shocked. And grandfather exhaled and said that it was nice to know that there were still those who honor Huashan, and asked the worker to bring them books. The box was placed on the table, and the owner was shocked, because it was the ledger of Huayin County. And the director said that since ancient times Huashan has been favorable to them. But they paid her with betrayal. The owner was shocked, and grandfather continued to say that, based on the ledger, Huashan will confiscate all the businesses run by the owner, as well as all the property acquired from them. Tom Head. People did not understand what it all meant and what kind of confiscation it was. But grandfather said that everything was as he said. And the owner said that the head's joke had gone too far. But the director replied that it was unfortunate that the head of such a great school as Huashan looked like a joker in their eyes. The owner asked the director not to rush. And they cannot know for sure whether this is truth or fiction. But the grandfather said the accusations were groundless. And these documents cannot be fake. But the owner says that he would not dare to say that it was a fake, but he too could be misled by this fake ledger. And the master said that what was said made sense and asked his subordinate to call the head of the finance pavilions. And so the head of the pavilion said that the veracity of the ledger is a matter that requires careful research. However, in anticipation of such doubts, 2 days ago he sent half of the ledgers to the Hawaiian government, and they are now being verified as authentic. The owner began to sweat. And he believed that everything was lost. If during their absence officials began a thorough inspection of local enterprises, then all the merchants, including him now at the Huashan school, would not be able to fight back. And the director's main goal was to lure them out of Huayin. In a panic, he reasoned that the days were enough to check all the ledgers. Moreover, if half is sent, then who will check only parts of the growth of the spirits and, most likely, what is in the box has also already been checked. In other words, the government is waiting for them at the foot of the mountain. An army prepared for withdrawal. The owner shouted in hysterics. But the director ordered him to moderate his ardor and that they had no right to open their mouths. Both the fact that pushing away the outstretched hand of a close friend who was in trouble and stabbing him in the back, and the fact that they are unworthy to be called friends anymore. And he ordered them to return to their shops, because everything would end as soon as they returned to Huayin. Grandfather added that he initially planned to confiscate everything from them without a trace, but for their hard work he would allow them to take 1 cart of property. And the fact that he will not remain in debt. After which the director turned to the people who went against the owner. He said that until the last moment you did not lose your humanity and the fact that their enterprise belongs to Huashan. And that won't change. And Huashan will return everything that was lost. However, it will allow them to continue to operate local businesses and make a profit. And the head offered to discuss their further cooperation and asked them to go inside. And the man walked silently and reasoned that this was better than depending on the owner of the horse, but overnight he turned from an owner into a deputy. And the heroes at that time were furious. I didn't understand why grandfather did this. Why did he allow them a cart of goods, since John Seung is a damn simpleton? This is Huashan property, and no one allowed him to throw it away. And now we see people with carts leaving Huayin. And he remembers that when they descended from Huashan, the enterprises were already occupied by government troops. And they were extremely unfriendly. If not for the request of the head, they would have already taken them away in a convoy. And if only these people didn't fall for the horse's words. And the man decided to contact the owner of the horse. He wanted to know what they should do now. And so that he would say at least something, and because this happened only because they trusted him. And the owner turned around with an angry face and asked if he had really been accused of something? And the man said that's not what he meant. And so that he doesn't have a fever because now they are just looking for shelter from the rain. And the owner tells them to think for themselves whether the ledger can be genuine and that it is a fake, and the head was slipped into a fake ledger. One of the men asked if the government had not confirmed its authenticity and that he had looked at it briefly and that the contents of the ledger were reliable. But the Khan replied that they had come to an agreement with the head of the district, dividing the property among themselves. And that they will first go to Luoyang. If these bastards put pressure on people with power, they will find justice for them. But the hero interrupts them, saying that this is complete nonsense. The owner asked who said this, and the swordsman said that there was no one here except him. And the owner only reasoned that in the light of day he was dressed as a robber, and judging by the arch of his back, he was an old man. And the owner said that if he coveted their property, then let him come from here, unless, of course, he doesn't want to lose his life. And the heroes asked for their property. And the hero psychotically stated that he did not rob them, he was going to return it by right. And the owner was at a loss that he could rightfully have it. After which the owner smiled and thought that this guy was from Huashan school. That this is very fortunate, because I just wanted to kick someone from Huashan. And so the bodyguards jumped out from behind them and began to rush at the hero. With a calm face, he interrupted them all at once and stood right in front of the owner. And he told him that he apparently didn't know anything. And for a long time, everyone who did not listen to him did not return on their own. And the horse was simply in shock. The owner was shocked that there really were still masters left in Huashan and ordered the bodyguards to get out and that they were useless trash. And he continued to say that he did not understand why someone like a hero was hiding in the walls, and if he had been on the front line, Huashan would not have sunk to the bottom. And only he chose the wrong time. And today he will die by the owner's hand, and his dead body will become a message for the head. Continuing the Khan, he said that grandfather should be very upset if the swordsman goes by his hand. And he told him to get ready. But Changmian reacted calmly, and he knew that the owner was not so simple, and he did not look like a simple owner of a farmstead in a provincial county. And he told him not to worry, because the mouth would not be touched. After all, the horse wouldn't be able to say a word otherwise. And then there was an explosion between the trees. And the owner's hands ended up in the ground. He reasoned that he did not lose his vigilance for a second, and everyone who has embarked on the path of improvement does not dare to neglect his opponent. And that even a tiger will put all his strength into catching a rabbit. And besides, it was worth seeing how the masked stranger scattered the guards, and there was no room left for frivolity. However, the hero looked as if he was about to fall asleep. And the owner decided to instantly erase this expression. And the swordsman repelled the owner's blow with the blunt end of the sword. And he grabbed his fist. Because by blocking the charged fist, the energy will flow back. Xion Myung told the horse that he had slowed down a lot and that he had better stop. After all, a couple more blows like this and his fingers will explode. He got angry and made a twist with his foot. However, the blow missed because the swordsman disappeared. And he appeared right behind him. And the next moment Hero punched him in the fist again. And the owner began to scream in pain. And the guy said that he told the owner that the fingers would get hurt first. And the owner didn't understand whether it was because he was too fast or because it was a matter of strength. After all, the stranger of the mask is not at all strong or fast, only outwardly he looks as if he could defeat 10. But it still can't even touch his clothes. After all, the swordsman constantly slowly guesses the ideal exact moment, moving in the appropriate direction at the appropriate distance, and there is nothing superfluous in his movements. And the horse seems to see things in front of him so. Because the hero calculates his every step. Like a monster. And he cannot even imagine how strong the swordsman is. But then Chan Myung said that no, that won't work. He wanted to frolic a little more, carried him, and left. And the owner began to say that how did it happen that someone like him never declared himself. The assistant stood up and said that, well, even if he finds out, what will it give him? What took the horse by surprise? Continuing, the guy said that those who only chatter live in some kind of illusions. And he will not immediately answer those who ask him a question. And what rather he should ask. Because the owner is too skilled in combat for a simple pavilion owner. And is such a master really content with the management of Wayne pavilions? He said that it's true, no, but such a master has many other ways to make money. Khan didn't understand what the guy wanted from him. And he said, okay, we forgot. And that this is not a conspiracy and not everything was not planned. It was his own initiative, and he did not use anyone's orders. I asked if that was what the owner wanted to say. The man agreed. And the hero said that of course, because everyone says so and that this guy doesn't have the slightest bit of imagination. And I decided to ask him a riddle. What should he do to extract information from such scoundrels as the owner? And he didn't know what to say. And the next moment the swordsman said that such people need to be beaten. Because what's the point of shaking someone who won't answer anyway? It's just a waste of your nerves. And the hero asked the owner not to say anything, because he would simply kill him until he was satisfied. And Cheon Myung moved towards the criminal. Khan saw that the swordsman was aiming for his right knee, and at this speed he would be able to stop him. However, the blow landed on the shoulder. And the man was perplexed as he fired at his shoulder and aimed at his knee. And he thought the next blow would be on the head, but the blow landed on the neck. The owner was at a loss, because he saw everything with his own eyes, and yet he never managed to dodge. And at this rate he really will die. And he decided to look into the eyes of the hero, and these were the eyes of a killer who took the lives of many people. And so the hero polished his sword. And the man was overcome with fear, because he never wanted to die. And the swordsman began to swing, and the owner began to scream in fear. The next moment happened, there was a powerful surge of blue mana. The owner lost it out of fear. And the hero became furious, because it was the palms of the Lord of Taya. And the swordsman decided to find out if this bastard was from the Zhangnan school. Volume Chapter. And the swordsman began to say that this is a surprise. The owner of the Huayin pavilions, shaking money from Huashan, skillfully wields Zhangnan techniques. This is a turn. Was it possible that the Zhangnan school sent him? And the owner was seized with fear. He thought that this curse had to be endured, even if his throat was cut. Moreover, even in front of a degenerate from Huashan, this is a fatal mistake. If only he had not taken him by surprise by swinging the ball unexpectedly, he would not have been confused and would not have used the palm of the Taya Lord. And if all this was planned, it's hard to even imagine how insightful he is. And the hero was just having fun. He asked the man if he would continue to remain silent here. If so, then this is not bad, because this is devotion, and he likes this outcome more than the others. After all, the Zhangnan school is not at all weak. For a long time, enmity arose between the Huashan and therefore the relationship did not work out, but even so he cannot admit that the Zhong school rightfully takes its place among the great schools. And a powerful school will not decide matters in this way. Khan doesn't know much, and he's unlikely to be useful, and in truth, just knowing that the matter is related to Zhanan is enough. And the hero called out that they were bastards, and yet the previous Murin, although he did not inspire confidence, did not act so basely, and now the bastards from schools do not compete with others in exploits, in wealth they also fool people worthy of admiration. And so the owner begins to say that isn't this the best outcome for Huashan? You see, the guy himself should know that the grip of the shunny is no longer a hope. Having lost the secret technique of the Huashan school, the Huashan will no longer be the same, and the only question is, will it collapse now or will it stand a little longer? And he just wanted to ease the suffering of a dying school. These words surprised the hero very much. Another man said that the school, having lost its masters, can only die, which infuriated the swordsman, and he asked the man who told him that? And the owner asked that he really couldn't understand and that someone like him wasn't there? And Shangman said that who told this man that Huashan has lost its technique? Continuing to get angry, the guy said that all talkers really have such shitty logic. The fact that it would be better to say that to crush Huashan by force, at least he is ready to admit the bastards of Zhangnan. And the hero began to argue that he had suffered greatly as schools that highly respected the traditions of Huashan and Chun had much in common with each other, even the ball styles were similar. If great schools with a similar system are located nearby, one of them will definitely have a hard time. And the owner started shouting that he was not from Zhangnan at all. And the hero says, yes, so empty, he says. Then he is not from Huashan either. The man asked what kind of nonsense this was, and the guy replied that he was such a bastard himself. But be that as it may, gratitude for the Thai technique will show him something interesting. Continuing, the guy said that it would be fun if he found out. And it's a shame if not. But the swordsman also told him to hand over every detail to the bastards who sent him. And the hero began to swing his swords, creating the illusion of many blades. Which made the owner's shock drop, and he began to think that with just his swings he had raised such a wind. And don't understand why the balls don't touch the body and what he's even trying to do? And the guy began to say that when plum flowers bloom in the snow, they emit the thickest aroma and it may be winter, but the age of Huashan has not yet come to an end. And soon with the arrival of spring, plum flowers will decorate the entire mountain. And at the end of this technique, many beautiful leaves flew across the sky. Bright red. And the owner didn't understand what he was seeing now, plum petals were showering his head. And then he was horrified when he remembered that this was the style of the ball. Flowers, plums, rain of fallen petals. Did he think it was an illusion? And then the man fell exhausted. He was covered in cuts, and the hero spat blood out of his mouth, thinking that he would definitely die. And that the strength is still not enough, and for the past it would have been a trifle, but now he swung his sword and all the strength of the body's strength left. And something needs to be done about this. And the hero noticed a peasant hiding behind a tree at that moment and called him to him. And they approached him, because the man was not alone, there were 4 of them. And the guy decided to find out who he should beat before leaving. The men stood there without saying a word. Then he decided to ask who would leave just like that. And everyone started shouting that they had to leave. And he said, "Okay, get out of here," and they ran away without all their things. But the swordsman stopped them by ordering them to stop. The men became shocked and did not understand what to do. The guy called them stupid. And he said, "How can she rush all these carts alone?" And he asked them to use their masks to brainstorm. And that each of them will report to him as much as the value of the property in their cart in life. And they agreed. And so the calculations began for each of the men. One had a Nagade, the other a Niango, and everyone was in shock. Where did he get so much? But he said that, is this important now? The swordsman stood and watched this, then something occurred to him, and it was that now someone alone would go to the nearest bank and bring money and sell everything there only for cash. And the hero added that they should not sign the receipt. If he sees that they signed up, he will punch them. And the man stood in shock, thinking that for the first time in his entire life he was meeting such a person. And he decided to find out what this guy would do if the one who went to the bank ran away. And the swordsman replied that he would run away and that now, because he still had something else left. In addition to the seized property. Is not it? And besides, if that's all they have, then wouldn't it be better to go back to at least get some interest? After which one of the men asks what if he reports to the government, for example. And the hero showed his powerful technique, saying, "Then try it. But then he had better never return to this place and, just in case, run to the edge of the mainland, because he will die, but he will catch the bastard." And the men realized that they shouldn't even think about escaping from this psycho. And they all quietly went to the bank. And after that, the hero, sniffing out the money, happy, returned back to Huashan. We see a stream on Mount Hua, where the ghoul twists its shape. And, as it turned out, it was not only him, but all the guys who were training, and they reasoned that today's training was completely infuriating. And do they really have to work hard from dawn? But the eldest was glad, because he sees how the guys have changed a lot and that he looks at them and sees them as very real students. His elder man comes in and asks why he's smiling? And he replies that he just thought that now they really were like real students. But Ghoul was overcome by strange thoughts and he says that this is probably strange, because they used to be a school, but the elder says that this is not so and that he himself thought about it. And they all laughed together. After all, just recently they could not even think that they would train hard. And before, they descended from the mountain only to fulfill the minimum quota and immediately returned home, but lately they more often catch themselves thinking that something has changed. And after that, the disciples decided to climb back up the mountain. But the elder continued to reason that it must all be because of the brat Xion Miang. And even if it is just a weak breeze now, no one knows whether it will remain just a light breeze or will turn into a typhoon that will turn the entire existence of Huashan upside down. And yet it will definitely bear fruit in the distant future. The boys ran to their school and saw shocking footage. After all, you were standing next to the school, workers were bringing in all sorts of objects. And they argued among themselves that they first needed to bring all the materials inside, and then start. And they shouted at each other so as not to break anything, because they could lose a month's income. The students did not understand who these people were and saw their teacher standing and leading the workers. So that they put the item where it needs to be. And the eldest decided to turn to the younger mentor and ask what was happening here. And the wards replied that they were general workers, and they decided to take the chance and carry out a major overhaul at the school. After which the teacher tells the student that he himself should have seen that their houses were very dilapidated. To which the student agreed. And the next moment the manager said, "What are they worth and that they help the workers?" After all, they were so tired while carrying materials. The guys continued to stand and did not understand what was happening, but then the teacher shouted at them, saying, "Why did they freeze? And to move quickly. And that feet in hands and forward." And then evening came. And there was a wonderful dinner, there was fried chicken with tomatoes, and the students asked if they were sleeping? And, apparently, this is what is called meat, and there cannot be such thing as meat on the table of Taoists. The boys' mouths were drooling and they called it a gift from above. And they started dinner. And the guys began to think that thanks to Cheon-myung, change could come much earlier thanks to his presentation. And so the elders went out into the street and began to argue that this happens once in a lifetime. And didn't the renovations begin too suddenly, and meat appeared on the table and they were also given a set of new uniforms? And the guy agreed with these words. But at the same time his face was pale, as if he were thoughtful. Ghoul decided to find out what his elder was thinking about. And he replied that money is very good and laughed. And in response he heard that he, too, was pleasantly surprised, although they had money, but he did not think that the elders would immediately begin to change something. But the elders said that his friend really thought that they endured poverty of their own free will. And since it's no longer there, there's nothing to be done. After all, it was the first time he himself had seen the junior mentor smile so happily. After all, he thought that he didn't even know how to smile. The guys continued to walk, wondering what could happen next. But they came to the conclusion that they themselves do not know their Huashan is changing at the speed of light, so they need to be prepared. Ready for rapid change. And the fact is that not all changes will be positive. After all, he himself saw the secret documents in the box. And then they had a flashback to how the heroes of the show caught their foot in a box of gold. Otherwise, scream, "Oh my god, what got caught in his leg and what can happen? Where does this gold bullion box come from?" And the students behind were in shock. And remembering this, the elder said that he himself brought them in with his game, like a felt boot. I wonder why he did this. And he answered so that everyone would know, most likely. But one thing is clear for sure. Huashan is changing. And that they cannot escape the winds of change, so they need to be determined and be prepared for anything. Because if you act rashly, they can be blown away by a hurricane raised by a swordsman. But Cho Gol told his elder not to worry. And then they wondered where the hero had gone, because he was not visible in the morning. And the elder one answers the guy that he really didn't hear him and the head was looking for him today and he must be in his house. And the guys didn't understand why he needed to go there. And there sat the director and several teachers, and the swordsman himself. And the grandfather began to say that for such a feat the hero is naturally entitled to a reward and Huashan will prepare this reward, and for this the head called him. And the guy asked in surprise that he would really be a reward, and the grandfather replied that it was true and asked him what the guy wants. After all, it must have been a shame to part with all these treasures, and if money was needed, they would allocate it. But the hero replied that he was not in poverty, which made the grandfather surprised. In any case, there is nowhere to spend them on the mountain. This brought the head into ecstasy. Because the guy follows the path of Taoism and it is not so easy to pacify his greed. But in essence, the swordsman only thought that they had no idea how much they would need and that there was a lot of this stuff in his storage. But the director decided to find out what the guy wanted, because he could admit him to secret techniques earlier than expected. But the guy says that this is not necessary. This shocked my grandfather. And he no longer knew what to offer him and asked them if the swordsman wanted to say that the school's technique was pointless. And the hero replies that it's not in this sense, because since the adults have set the line, then there's no point in breaking it. And the head said that the guy was right and that he was saying only the right things. But the Bolnik inside only reasoned that this was all bullshit, and that he should be the one giving lessons to the director. And in any case, they still have a lot to teach and, as it were, to do it all unnoticed. But at the same time, the guy didn't understand why he should worry about this. After all, what does he need? He did not know what Huashan, of which only the name remained, could give him. And suddenly it dawned on the hero, and he asked permission to go down to Huayin when he needed it. After all, the guy wanted freedom to begin with, and with an increase in the radius of movement, more opportunities would appear. Surprised by this, the guy continued that he felt that he could not develop day and night, training in a confined space. But, however, if he can move freely at any time, I am sure that he will be able to open new boundaries and achieve better results. The head agreed with his intentions, but this was contrary to Huashan discipline. And the grandfather praised the guy for his worthy deed, but he is afraid that this will cause discontent among other students. And the heroes could not withstand the meticulousness of the chapter. And the guy was asked if anything else came to his mind besides this? But the swordsman simply did not know what else he could wish for if he was not even allowed out of the mountains. But the next moment something occurred to him. And the hero turned to his head with delight, saying that his body was in very poor condition. And Grandpa noticed this? And the guy continued to say that, according to the doctor, his circulation of natural blood was disrupted. And in that case, couldn't Grandpa give him some healing pills? The director completely agreed, but was shocked when he heard about some kind of pills. The owner asked the guy about the pill, and he replied that yes, it helps restore the body. And the leader told his subjects to listen. And they listened to him carefully. And took a sip of tea. The head said that in the name of the director of Huashan School, from now on, Huashan student Chongmen is the only one allowed to go down to Huayin. This greatly shocked the guy, and his subjects agreed with the director. But grandfather objected that, however, Chongmen could not go beyond the Huayin. The swordsman did not understand why the director changed his mind, because he had just forbidden him. The director also told the guy not to think that if he did something, he could avoid responsibility, and told him to go for a walk, swimming him out of his house. The hero was only sad, she chose, and asked, "What about the pills?" But the doors closed in front of him. And the swordsman became furious, because he had asked the director in a human way, and he now thought that he would die. But at the same time, grandfather did not have any medicine that would kill him. And the guy began to think that he would die from the disease.